Hey guys.
Hello.
Hey,
Okay.
hi.
Audio is all good.
Yeah.
Oh, you
Okay.
bet.
Good. Happy to see you guys. Chris, you look
Happy to
very
see you.
clean and professional today.
Put on a nice shirt for you guys.
For sure with the collar. Guys, um, we have with um, today's show comes straight out of the headlines.
Okay.
We're always having these conversations like how Kabbalah should we get, how mainstream media, like what's going on, not mainstream media, how like headlines should we get, how much fortune telling or like of like where things are going should we get. Today I'm hoping is gonna strike what's the expression called?
Ford?
Strike
Accord?
a chord.
Strike a chord.
Yeah. I hope that we'll be able to find through the headlines some very fundamental things about the nature of spirituality and the nature of the process that we're in as human beings. It should go without saying. I don't think that Kabbalists usually have to give disclaimers. It should go without saying. We're not talking about any kind of political stances. We're not interested in political stances. We're interested in spirituality. We're interested in love. We're interested in the connection of humanity. That's where we're going. Did you guys see this? The guy, the CEO of Nvidia. I think he's the CEO of the big dude at Nvidia, whose company is now worth $2 trillion or something like that. He was talking to the students at Stanford about what
Mm-hmm.
he wished for them. He says, "I wish on you more pain and suffering."
Oh, really?
And
Nice
he
stuff.
gave it, yeah, yeah, and he gave it was really nice. He gave it not in a like
Those
I
are
wish that
really
you would suffer, not in that way. He said like there needs to be a culture of resilience, not that you should feel pain and
Oh,
suffer
okay.
because of it,
Okay.
but that you should like that in the
Like
process
be
of
ready to
growth,
carry a load kind of thing. Be
be
ready
ready
to
to deal
carry a
with things.
burden to deal with it. It's like a Jordan Peterson type of
He was
mentality,
saying that the
yeah?
the, the
Like
uh, younger generation doesn't have any resilience
or
to be able
Oh
to
man,
discipline.
dude,
deal.
I was
Yeah,
just
like
thinking that. I was looking at my
self-discipline,
kid.
resilience.
He, Akiva's been home sick for like 4 days, 5 days, 4 days, and today he wasn't sick. And then we were like last night, "You're going to school?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah, definitely going to school. It's very important. We'll have a lot of work, a lot of stuff I have to do." And then in that moment of waking the body up, like, and you're tired and you feel it, and the body's screaming, "No, no moving." Despite all of the preparation that we did, knowing that this moment would come, I was looking. I was like, I've never seen someone want to run away from suffering more than this child. And I understood, like, every time you see it in the movies, like, it'll make you strong, it'll make you tough. Like, okay, that's just like some father. But here, it's like I'm looking at him like he can't handle like the small. Like, you go tell him to take a shower, it's like, oh God, I'm like dying. How do we do that? How do we add some suffering and make him stronger? Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. So now we have an understanding
Yeah,
to start with.
there.
So, from the perspective of the wisdom of Kabbalah, all of humanity, meaning every single one of us and you, is part of one integral superhuman. So each one of us, let's either call each one as a cell or each one as an organ in this Superman in our books, in the books of the wisdom of Kabbalah, it's called Adam. All right. So all of us are actually part of this one super creature, and there's no problem with anyone. Not only is there no problem with anyone, nature painstakingly spent a few billion years crafting you to be exactly as you are now. So what's the problem? The problem, no problem with any one of you, of us. The
Right.
problem of this in this system of the Superman is that the intestine is connected to the mouth, or the fingers sticking in the eye. The problem is just the parts are not connected correctly. So
Mhm.
I build something that's good for my cell, for good for me, but I hurt you in the process because I don't feel the whole body. Or you build, you because you're such a good person and you're so environmental, You build an electric car to feel better about yourself, but you send someone else's children into the cobalt mine to get you the cobalt that you need for your battery.
Mm-hmm.
We don't feel connected. So all of those pieces of that Superman called Adam in the books of Kabbalah, all of those pieces are together, but in this disconnected, shattered state, in a place, in a spiritual place called the worlds of Bia. That's where they are. It's just what it's called there. The worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya. And our goal is to perform many actions, mostly in our hearts and mostly in our minds, and definitely not by throwing more money at these stupid agencies, right? Who we expect them to solve our problems, but mostly those who get what's going on here. It's thousands and millions of actions, mostly in our hearts and our minds, to make those connections and bring that broken system over the border. It's a border called the Parsa there, over that border into God's house, into Atzilut, into some place where it's all that whole structure of us is connected correctly. That place where it's connected correctly is called Atzilut, and the process we're in is connecting all of those pieces. We do. So why not just throw us all? Why don't the Kabbalists just throw us all over the border at once? Right? Just let's get there. Like now. Why this process? So what would happen if we let a baby eat whatever he wanted? Right? Like Legos, socks, dirt. But for a baby, what do? We give a baby like special mashed up baby food. And then when he has teeth and he can start to chew the world, we start him on certain solid foods. And then when his system is ready, he can have some meat. And when his system is more ready, we give him some garlic and some whiskey, right? Like as the system develops, so it can manage more things. But you don't just take a baby and put a steak and a whiskey in him, right? So it brings us, you have to let him develop to the point where he can ingest the outside world in a way that won't poison him. So it brings us to the topic of our show today. It's impossible that some nice politicians in their nice office will somehow decide to allow millions of migrants from second and third world countries to cross over the border of another country, let's say the United States' southern border, for example. It's not a political show, just talking about a concept here. And somehow naturally assimilate into that place in a way that's healthy for them and in a way that's healthy for the people in the land where they end up. Rav Kook, huge Kabbalist. He says, all humanity deserves to be a single family. Okay, that's the goal. So the goal is, yes, that everyone will be integrated and everyone will be happy together. He says, I have a quote here, just a minute. He says, all the quarrels and ill will that stem from the divisions of the nations and boundaries will cease. So that's the goal, that we'll all be one family. But the question is, how will all of these unique characteristics from all these different places be harmonized so that you can't just bring a couple million people into a new place, different culture, different language, different society, and say, here, let's imagine that everything will develop in a smooth way. It's clear that the place where people are coming from, there could be no human rights there. There could be really poor living conditions. That's not in question here, right? Let's say it is bad and they deserve to have a better place, but there is a border between that place and this place. So should you learn the culture? Should you learn the language? We're not doing a political show. I want to just use all these these things from our world to talk about this boundary here. You guys, please jump in and slap me in the head or knock me over anytime you want. I know. So the United States is an incredible experiment. I think Indian Americans, meaning from India, it's the ethnic group with the highest median family income, like $150,000 Okay, families from Turkey, Philippines, Italy, Macedonia, England, Switzerland, many people from all over the world can come here and have a median household income of almost $100,000. Like you can integrate into a way where you do, let's say, if that's our measure, you do really well. Okay. But you can't just take steak and shove it into a baby's mouth and expect that the baby's going to be healthy.
The baby being the United, like the
Just an
general.
example. Yeah, in this example, it does, yeah. Well, America is kind of a baby, and the scope of countries. I wasn't relating America to being a baby, but people came to this country, like the Western Europeans who originally did what they did here and established this place. They were looking for a free, stable place where they could feel safe and um, free to practice their religion and do their thing. So this is what's going to happen now. American businesses and American smart people will leave America. They'll go look for other places where they feel safe and where it's more stable, and they'll move their banks and they'll move their businesses and they'll move their factories to other places, and America will be shaken to the core, and who knows what,
Oh,
what
okay,
could
you
happen here.
you asked to interject at will. So
Please.
I would say first of all, I think it's a very profound topic subject that we have on our hands because borders. What are borders? Borders exist everywhere. First of all, it's not just, the immediate thing that we think of when we say borders is a physical line separating between the geographies, the territories of two countries. But there's borders everywhere in every aspect of life, on every level of life. There are interpersonal borders, psychological borders. Today, more and more increasingly, we see digital borders, for instance, that create echo chambers defining what kind of information flows to you and what kind of information goes away from you. There are borders between every element in reality and other elements in reality. Essentially, wherever you look, there is a border that defines where something begins and something ends. Why do we have these borders? Why do borders exist? What are borders in the grand scheme of things? In the structure, the fundamental structure of reality, there is a concept of a border. What is that? I would say let's dive into that first. Let's go really, to the deepest foundation of any kind of border that we experience and we see in the world, including between countries and nations and people and so forth. Let's talk about the root of that first, and then we
Well,
can
you can start.
kind of see where it
Let's do
goes.
it because you just
Yeah, okay.
inspired. You just inspired this idea. That's like the almost the most macro. This borders of
Okay. So
between
I
countries.
I
But
can't.
really,
I
it goes. What?
goes what?
It gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and then until you get to basically this. I mean, if you say borders of countries, and then you say borders between, I don't know, families or like relationships between people. This is where my family begins. This is where somebody else's family, begins,
Right.
and my family ends. You have ecosystems, right? This is where a forest ends and the desert begins. Everything, or a cell. Even this is a cell wall, and this is its own cell. And so
Yeah.
you're not even talking about whether or not countries can correctly operate, but whether or not your body can correctly operate if there were no borders between distinct mechanisms inside the body. You don't have a body that lives. So you go even smaller. Like you're wanting to find the root of the border. So
Yeah.
how can you even get smaller between
Okay.
an individual atom, right? So what's smaller than that?
Okay, well, I would say what's more fundamental than that. The
Fundamental.
yeah
Sure.
the I came prepared with a
Bring it
quote,
on.
a quote that is there we go. I can put it on the screen. Give me a second here. Okay, so this is a quote from our teacher Michael Leitman, and yeah, let's just. This is from a couple of years ago, like almost 10 years ago. in one of the Kabbalah daily lessons that he gives us. So check this out. So, oh, wait a second. You won't be able to see it sharp. How about now? Can you see it well?
Yeah, it looks
Yeah?
good.
Okay, cool. So, yeah. Now you should
So
see it.
Adam
Okay.
Rishon, this is the
Yes.
superhuman that we
Exactly.
talked
So
about.
Seth was just talking. Yeah, he just mentioned it. Adam Arishon, same thing. This term in Kabbalah refers to this collective entity that we're all part of, right? So you know what? Let's just kind of read it. It's short. Let's read it, and then let's unpack it together. Let's kind of workshop it together. So Adam Arishon finds his borders through the shattering. To what extent he can control himself, to what extent he is controlled by the creator, and where is the border between these controls. It gives him a sense of independence, that if he maintains the border, he will be able to build himself. Initially, he's built by the creator, and now once it's shattered, he can begin building himself on his own. We are the outcomes of this shattered vessel, pieces of Adam Arishon, called Bnei Adam, which means, it's an interesting word actually. In Hebrew, Bnei Adam is literally the word for human beings, but the root of that word, the literal translation of Bnei Adam means children of Adam. We are pieces of that collective Adam that Seth was talking about, and that Kabbalist Michael Lightman is talking about here. And human beings, from a Kabbalistic perspective, are all children of this collective being called Adam. Thus, our work becomes clear, keeping the limitations that became revealed through the shattering. So what's going on here? Let's unpack it together, okay? So Adam Rishon, again, that's the collective created being, one single creation. We sometimes call it the single vessel, the single creation, the collective soul, the collective desire. There's a couple different ways to refer to that, but all it is talking about one thing. Essentially, and this is important to understand, from a Kabbalistic perspective, we are not separate individual beings. We're fragments of one collective being. That's a big thing. And
there's a lot of people that feel that too. Maybe they want to be one family. They feel like that's how it should be. Like a lot of people have this inclination to like, how do we get there? Of course, there's a lot of times in history where they maybe have forced that on some people, and like Seth said, you can't shove that steak into a baby's mouth. But yeah, I think people in general feel that that's correct.
Right.
That's
So
like a natural.
on the one hand, we all feel that. On the other hand, this quote is talking about Adam Arishon finds his borders through the shattering. So what's going on here? So this is about the first border ever created in reality. That's what we're talking about here. There was no concept of borders in the very first state of creation, the creation of that collective vessel, the creation of that collective soul. There was no border at all between that vessel and the creator that created it, the light that created it, the upper force, the quality of bestowal.
It had endless light, and that endless light was doing what it was doing, but there was no higher, lower, over to the
Exactly.
east or over to the west. Everything was just filled with completely.
Complete
We're talking about
evenness.
before space and time.
Before space, before time, before any kind of of a perceiving creature. Space and time are results of the perceiving creature, which is us. The space and time don't exist outside of us. So that first creature was immersed in light when it was created, meaning it was immersed in the force that created it. So there was no distinction. What does that state? What is that state similar to? Like in our world, we see a replica of that whenever a baby is born. At first, it starts in the womb. When the baby is in the womb, the embryo developing for several months in the womb, it has no distinction of itself. We were all in a womb. We all experienced that. We don't remember any of that, right? Why? Because we had no sense of self. We had no consciousness. We had no independent self in that state. And that was when we were completely immersed in our mother's womb. That's the first state of creation is similar to that. In order for the created being to feel itself, there has to be a border. There has to be a difference. There has to be a distinction between the creator and the created being. Then the created being inside that border, and only thanks to that border, can build himself, as we read in the quote, can build himself independently. That's why a baby also has to come out of the womb in order to grow independently. So the first border ever created enables the created being to actually feel itself. Now, even just from that, just from understanding that, you can understand why everything in our reality has border. By the way, without membrane, without a membrane, which is it's one of the conditions for life to evolve, life would not develop. Even if you have all the elements for life, like say oxygen and, even in water and so forth, all those elements will not grow if there's no membrane that collects them together and separates them and allows them to then develop with each other. So borders...
It's always like if you look at it, an egg, there's all this whole natural science around the border too, because it can't be too hard, otherwise the chick can't get out. But it can't be too soft, otherwise it'll crush. So like
Right.
all of the time, there's, depending on where that border is, it has to have all of these very, very specific conditions.
Exactly.
After the show, everyone's going to be seeing. They're just going to be looking around, and everyone's just going to be seeing all the different types of borders. I actually
Everywhere.
I was
It's
listening to
everywhere.
something.
It's all over.
It's
Yeah.
everywhere, and I heard an interesting one. Someone was talking about like how people would research reality. Let's say, before the scientific method, quote unquote, was established, you would just be out in nature and you would just observe the phenomena. And there was a certain point in time where you actually enclosed yourself inside this, what's called like a lab, right? You secluded yourself, created this border, and conducted inside that many, many different types of experiments. And from there, science really did grow. You came out of kind of like this borderless nature where you observed everything happening and brought it in within a border and allowed it to grow. So you look everywhere and you're going to start seeing this border taking place and what the implications are.
Exactly. And then
Such a thing.
you start thinking about how it manifests in our life. I mean, from that initial root, that spiritual root, a border that was created between the creator and the created being, that collective vessel, that collective creation, and the light that created it. Because of that border, thanks to that border, created due to a process called the shattering in Kabbalistic terminology, it created an independent space for the created being to build himself and become, if this is too complicated, we don't have to go there. But you guys gauge it for
I don't know
where you think the show needs to go. So Seth, but the shattering created this space where the created being can grow independently. What does it mean that the created being grows? It can become similar to the light that created it, to the quality that created it, a quality of no borders, a quality of oneness, unconditional bestowal and giving, unbounded existence, above space, above time. The created being can now build himself in similarity to that quality without losing his independence. That's the whole patent of creation. That's the whole... because the first state of creation was an embryo in a womb. A created being similar to an embryo in a womb. It's a replica. It's an example, right? It's a root and branch. So there was no distinction. The vessel didn't feel itself, like a candle in a torch, Bala Sulam calls it, right? If you put a light of a candle inside a bigger flame, is it there? Is it not there? Right? It's a big question. Think about it. A question that we have until today we're not clear about it, and it's a great source, great point of contention, is when do you call the embryo in the womb? When do you call it alive? Right? Is it, is it the first week? Is it 40 weeks? Is it there? It's there, but it's not there. So is it considered, if you if you do an abortion, is it considered killing a person or not? You go into a huge, we can fight for years over this, right? And people have been doing this quite successfully. Why? Because in that state where there's no distinction between the created being and the creator, there is no, you can't really say if the created being is there or not, like an embryo in a womb, like a candle in a torch. And so that's why there has to be a clear border created. The baby has to come out of the womb in order to grow. There has to be a shattering process by which the created being separates himself from the creator. That's why we're in a state, our life, our world, our physical world, our entire existence, physical existence, is a dream world, a certain kind of a false perception, which is where we are inside borders that separate us from the quality of bestowal. And that's why our entire existence feels like an egoistic existence where all we know is that we want to receive pleasure. All we know is that we fight a lot with each other. All we know is that we have a body that lives and dies, and everything seems to us like transient and temporary, and everything's limited. We're separated completely from a reality of eternity, a reality of unboundedness. We're just separated from it. That root, that happened in the shattering of the collective soul. That is the root of all kinds of borders that we experience in our reality, because we human beings are outcomes of the shattering, children of Adam Rishon. And when
we have a border crisis
Yeah.
in the United States now. Okay, you guys in Israel, the border of the country was breached.
No problems over here.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a problem. So the question is, we have to get to a point where we can be as one.
Yes.
But we still have to remain as ourselves. We still have to keep our identity.
That's the whole thing.
Right?
That's the whole thing.
And there's people, for example, on the other side of the border who may, let's take the United States as an example. And let's not talk about all the Hezbollah, Hamas, and ISIS that's crossing the border. Let's just say the actual refugees that are crossing the border. So there's people coming from a place where there's lacking human rights or poverty, right? So in their mind, let's go to America. There's a lot of opportunity. So, and this whole country, give us your tired, give us your weary. Like the Statue of Liberty, like the quote there is about, like, give us your tired, hungry masses. Like, that's what this place is supposed to be about, that a person could come here. But let's say you are a kind-hearted person, right? And you want to help people, but do you just open your door and be like, honey, I saw some people on the street. I invited them all over for dinner tonight, right? Or do you have some kind of order? Maybe at first I don't just take people off the street, even though I want to help. I don't just take people off the street and bring them into my kitchen or into my bedroom, right? Like, there has to be some integration between all this. So
of course there has to be an integration process. Let's make this like absolutely clear. Show me a process in our world where some disparate pieces work together by simply just melting into each other, and that's it. This way, you don't get a function from any one of
bombs. Remember we talked about Oppenheimer? I mean, this is how you get a bomb.
Right,
tragedy. It's just smashing opposite things.
For example, okay, take it. Let's take a more emotional kind of personal example. I mean, you meet someone, you go on a date, right? I mean, like romantically, right? So you meet a new person, you go on a date, you go on a second date. What begins to happen the more you know each other? You begin to know each other's borders. You begin to understand what you can do in relation to the other people, around to the other person, around the other person, with the other person, that will feel okay to them and that will feel okay to you. And so you're standing when you're even when you're meeting someone romantically and you're trying to build a life together, you're trying to build something, it's based on understanding how to connect above the border and not invade into each other's borders without respecting them, right? So that's the kind of thing that we have to do throughout all of creation. We, human beings, the children of this collective soul, after the shattering, everything, all that's happening is basically we're clarifying the borders between us on many levels, right? Don't just think about the territory border between countries. We're clarifying the borders between us so we can independently work to connect to each other in a way that actually works, so that ultimately we can become similar to the creator, but that's a higher level. Okay.
We all have our
Yeah.
natural kind of tenets. We always see the problem of like trying to force yourself, on someone, on something. The
Yeah.
forcing aspect never works. And when you brought that up, it reminded me of this thing. I also was saving this little thing. This is from this is Baba Sulam, also Kabbalist before Rabash. He wrote this. He wrote the introduction to the Book of Zohar, and here he's talking about basically the same thing. This is what he says. He says, "As the axe cuts,
You got it
axe
on
like
the screen.
the
Can
axe."
we also see it?
You
No.
know what? Let's do that.
If it's at hand, if it's
Yeah, you're right.
if it's
It'll
easy to
it'll it'll
do,
just look better.
easier to
As
follow. Yeah.
the You see this, right?
Not yet. Yep. See it. Yep. Go ahead.
As the axe cuts and splits a physical object into two, the disparity of form, meaning like the differences in form, right, divides the spiritual into two.
Beautiful.
For example, when two people love one another, you say that they are attached to one another as one body. And when they hate one another, you say that they are as far from one another as the east from the west. But there's no issue of nearness or remoteness of location here. Rather, it implies equivalence of form.
So
When
it's
they are equal
it's a
in form and
non-physical equality or disparity. Yeah.
correct. That's what he's pointing at here. That was just what we're getting at. Rather, it implies equivalence of form, right? So when they are equal in form and one loves what the other loves and hates what the other hates, they love one another and are attached to one another.
So
That's it.
on the spiritual path, there's all of these. Well, there's one primordial structure called like Yud Hey Vav Hey, something like that. Is that the best way to call it? Just as one primordial structure, and wherever you go, right? First it builds the worlds, then it builds the parts of Fim, then within the parts
Yeah.
of Fim, there's all
It's
these
the it's
different.
the master template of creation, I would say. Yeah.
So it keeps going. So like in our life, you're getting along great with someone. Then the next day or the next week, or like how is it possible we're fighting about this again? We just were so close. What happened? So there's these constant. Chris, can you put the quote up for a sec? One more again?
You bet.
Yeah.
There you go.
Says. Okay.
Yeah.
It implies equivalence of form when they're equal of form and one loves what the other loves and hates what the other hates. They're attached to each other. So on this process, yeah, thanks, Chris. It's like we reached a border together.
Yeah.
We became one. That border disappeared. We felt like there's no distance between you and me, right? We're in this bliss together. And then something happens again, and there's another border. And then we go through life again together, and then we come together again, and all is well in the world again. That border goes
Becomes
away.
a bridge
So
or something. Yeah. It becomes
yeah,
like
so
it becomes a connector.
it's not
Yeah.
It's not just one gate
Mm.
opens and then closes and opens and closes. But what we should start to recognize in ourselves is these are progressive. It's that one structure, but it's progression. And we should all feel that we're advancing and moving from one border then to the next border to the next place. And each time, what's happening is as we equalize with each other, the border disappears.
Yes.
And as we equalize with each other more, the next border disappears. And this is the
Nice.
process that we're going through in humanity. With the baby, all of these systems happen very naturally, right? 9 months, like boom, that baby, he was kept inside that womb with just the right amount of food. Not too much, not too little. All the waste system worked perfectly. Everything, the temperature, everything was regulated. Then it's time to come out. Boom, he gets out of that very, very, very narrow passage. Boom, into the world, right? Like all of these different processes that have to happen. Now, when we look at the what happened on the border of Israel or what's at the border of the southern United States right now, we're not like a baby in the womb. No, the process is a similar process, but we're not unconscious infants. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
we are very conscious and we received books from other conscious people who wrote stuff 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago for us after they went through everything they went through and passed that information on to us. And we have our own life experience. So now it's not up to us to just laissez-faire go through life. And I mean, maybe the kind of crisis we're dealing with now is better than a nuclear war. I mean, not maybe, it's, I guess, better than a nuclear war, which will, also force everyone to be like, well, I guess we should put down our differences because that's one way to be smashed
Mm-hmm.
together. But we now are in a situation, all of us, in all of the countries we live in. All of Europe is dealing with immigration, whether you are a country that says absolutely no, we're not letting immigrants in, or whether you're a Western European country that opened your door and your country will change. Listen, all of Europe was Moor, right? That's Arab. Moor, like Spain. When you go to Spain, you see like all the churches, they have these arches, right? Because it was all brown at one point. Now it's white. Okay, but it can be brown again. There's no problem here of things changing. The only problem is how many people need to die. How much suffering does there need to be? Things are changing. Europe is changing. The United States is changing. It's not a problem. The problem is just how much suffering does there need to be? How can we integrate all of these changes in a
So
natural and healthy and spiritual way?
exactly. So human beings need to learn how to cope with their borders. That is essentially the entire the complete essence of the correction process that is happening from the initial state of the shattering until the final correction, as we call it in Kabbalah, the complete connection between everyone, where all the borders disappear. But it has to happen gradually and in a healthy way where, like spouses that study each other and get closer to each other, if it's a true connection, if it's a true healthy, positive, mutually beneficial, healthy connection between spouses, they don't just invade each other and run over each other and try to overpower each other. Rather, they study each other and they each time try to achieve some equivalence of form with each other. Some sort of a space where they live inside each other, even though they also remain each one in their borders. That's a very
The
unique thing.
inside each other is very descriptive and like
And it
kind of
stays
it's similar to the baby. It's like the baby was very comfortable, safe in the womb, right? And that's almost like where we all want to return every time. It's like that's the safe. We want to go backwards, but
I
as
want to
soon as we
say
come out,
this.
it's just suffering from the very beginning. Suffering. Yeah.
I want to say this. I don't know if we're really managing to communicate this because it's a deep thing, like I wouldn't be able to show it to you on a diagram, but it's an emotional thing. But that's why I think spouses is the best example, maybe. But canceling the borders is it's not that we're breaking the borders. Rather, we use the borders to build such a connection between us that is real. And that means that we are respecting the borders between us, and yet we work to connect in such a way as if they don't exist. So they don't, it's not like we break them, rather they by themselves, they disappear gradually. I have a perfect quote from our teacher, but I don't have it translated. I can translate it on the fly. You want to try?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so he says this. This is from one of those new live shows, where he does with our friends, where they talk about various topics from a Kabbalistic perspective. So they spoke about borders. Um, okay. So the matter of borders. I'm translating this on the fly. Sorry if it's not the best, eloquent translation, but you'll get the most of the gist of it. The matter of borders is how we're going to cancel them gradually, gently, one by one. We do it in a way that we begin to discover that we can reach a state where I live inside the other and the other lives inside me. In this way, we're coming not to the breakage of the borders, rather, they disappear as if they dissolve by themselves, bit by bit, and very gradually. We get to a point where we can truly merge with each other. We grow to merge with each other. And I'm beginning to feel all the others in my feeling. Because in truth, we all live, all our life is from our own sensation. We picture the entire world inside our sensation. Okay, I don't know how clear that is, but for
Okay.
people,
Okay.
but the point,
There is some feeling. There's
yeah,
some feeling.
I mean, when you, again, between going back to spouses, right? When you are trying to connect with your partner, what happens is not breaking the borders, rather making them your own limitations. Like what bothers you, that's going to be a limitation for me now. And when that happens, it's like it doesn't exist because both of us will not. I will not. I will not. That I will not cross that border, and you won't need to defend it. So it's as though it doesn't exist, even
What you're
though
saying is you and I just there's no you and I then. That's kind of what you're saying. The whole concept is of
I'm
where I
actually
feel
saying that.
myself as I. Well, okay, I get it. But what you're saying is where I first felt myself as I kind of takes on a new definition.
Yes.
Myself has like a new definition.
Oh. Okay, Seth, where do you want us to go? Because I feel like
You know what?
we're
I'm
yeah.
lost in my thoughts actually. Um, I'm thinking about how it's possible. Um,
So what do we do with you wanna talk about the earthly kind of more ramifications
Of
of this
animals.
I
approach?
don't I
Of this
don't know.
approach?
Well, no, the earthly ramifications are things are going to be horrible. You know, at this if we let things go laissez-faire the way they are now, and just take um imagine you take a school where everyone celebrates Christmas, for example, and speaks English, and you just put, fill that school with people from another religion. They won't have the right holidays off. They won't have the right foods in the school so everyone can be okay. The kids won't speak the right language. Uh, like it will lead to also societally. Like there's different men and, the male and female role, the husband and wife role are very different. In America, we're very liberal. We allow people to organize themselves pretty much however they want, and everything is tolerated here. in 2024. You bring in people from more traditional places who have different views of women without any kind of integration process or without even checking a criminal background. This could be a murderer, for example. Now, obviously, most people crossing the border are not murderers, obviously. But you should say, we don't want to import people who are murderers. That's not even happening. The border's just open around that. So it's clear that there's problems there. What I'm mostly thinking about and where my mind is going is, for us, how do we think about in our spiritual work? Because none of us are going to any border with guns to protect people or let them in, or you guys, in Israel, it's not like we're frontline soldiers with guns. It's not our job. But our job is to understand and talk about here and share with people how to absorb the spiritual knowledge, the spiritual wisdom, to understand this situation we're in, the kind of humanitarian crisis we're in, the crisis that humanity is in right now, of how we have to become one family.
Yes,
We have to become one family. We
that's
have to
exactly
become one.
this is already what's happening is that this is in motion already. That's why we're seeing these issues. Everything that's happening from the moment that this Adam, this super organism, was shattered, from now on, everything that's happening can be summarized in the word integration. We have to get to a point where we're completely, all pieces of humanity, and all pieces of nature, by the way, all elements of reality become completely incorporated into each other, so they become as if they are one, right? So that's why we're having problems with each other and conflicts and sometimes wars and problems with the borders and so forth, because this process needs to happen. We have to merge somehow, but we have to do it consciously, correctly, in a healthy way, by learning what nature wants from us. And if we don't do it, nature just pushes us, and that creates conflict. Just pushes that integration, and that
So
creates
let's talk about
conflict.
it from that. Let's talk about it from that perspective. Let's talk about the surrounding light.
I just want to add
What?
one more aspect to this. I want to say
Yeah.
that it's not just a problem of physical borders. I think that you're right. This problem doesn't meet most people who are listening to this show, or most people in general. It's like it's more of a problem for, if it hit you in some way, or a problem for the politicians or so forth. But we're no longer in just a very physical world. We're very much living in a digital world, maybe most of our day. And there, we also experience the problem of
Yeah,
borders all
what
the
do you
time.
what kind of viruses do you let into your consciousness
Exactly.
from your phone?
Exactly. Isn't that a lot more serious and immediate than a problem in your with your physical borders? I mean, every second of the day there
You can be
is.
infected by all kinds
Exactly.
of mind viruses every time you pick up your phone and you're seeing
Exactly.
things in your
And
feed
and those feeds that determine the majority of what you watch, those feeds are essentially borders. The algorithms that are shaped by the companies making those making them, working on them, they're essentially building a border between you and the world, and they're deciding how flexible that border is and what is the purpose of it, what kind of information and values and influence goes through that algorithm to affect you. And this is happening every second. It's, as we're talking, just yesterday or 2 days ago, there was some bill in the U.S. House to ban TikTok,
Hmm.
something like that. I don't remember the details, right? But if you think about it, that's a big thing. That's a major issue, because there's 170 million users in the U.S. on TikTok. That's like more than half the population of the U.S. population, right? On this app, and this app also is we know is created, developed in a competing country. So
This is a great this is a great idea. So I mean a great point. So there's very little border, right? If the government, for example, isn't regulating and they can just be you can just be fed anything by this app. So you open it up, and especially if you're a child who doesn't have a lot of
uh-huh.
experience of how
You
to
don't even
protect himself.
realize that there is something influencing you. You're just
Someone is making
in the
you, if they
experience.
want it. Now, it's much better if you read Sun Tzu's Art of War. It's much better to win the war without having to send your army over there. If you
Mm-hmm.
can get kids to start hating their parents, if you could get kids to start hating their country, if you could get families to start breaking up, you don't need to fly any planes or launch any bombs or even let anyone know that you did it. The other country will just start destroying itself. So we're talking also about the border of the mind. And
Yeah.
this is also very important. You don't need to believe everything you hear. Not only that, you don't need to hear everything. You
Exactly.
you
You don't
you
even need to
don't
hear it.
need
Yeah.
to you don't if you hear things that are going on, it's like in the olden days, in the 70s or the 80s, you just change the channel.
Yeah.
You just change the channel.
Yeah. Today it's much more complicated. You can't really just
But you
change
you
the channel.
can
Yeah.
but it's very important to make these borders for ourselves. In fact, in order, we can maybe get into spirituality a little deeper here. In order to progress spiritually, a person must create a border and stop what's coming to him from the outside at first, and then start calculating what can I work with here spiritually, and what can the person who is actually gets on the path to advance, like the advanced path, when he moves beyond just preparation, he starts to do the work. He stops everything and says, "What now? What can I work with here?" I don't. He doesn't let everything in that he hears, everything in that he sees, and anything that comes from a billboard and from what people are saying, and from this guy's opinion and that politician's opinion and that news. He stops everything.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean he closes himself in a box. He prepares himself, and
And
he.
and on higher, even higher, deeper spiritual degrees, in contact when a person comes in contact with that quality of bestowal, you put the Kabbalist himself puts a border between that light and his ego, because he doesn't want to take it into his own self benefit, egoistic benefit. He wants to be like the light. He wants to be in the quality of bestowal. And so essentially, entering spirituality, crossing the border into spirituality, basically means applying the border over your ego. That's a very interesting thing. Or you can say we are transcending the border of the ego, but it's by recognizing that ego first. So
Consciously.
the issue, yeah, the issue with borders is a very it's tricky. It's a very tricky thing because I want to try to say something like this. If you look at politics and you look at the border debate, doesn't matter what country, there's a border debate somewhere, let's not even talk about specifically where, it doesn't matter. There's a border debate somewhere. And then typically you'll see some people in one side of the political spectrum saying we should open it up, and the other people from the other side will say no, we should close it. And then that pendulum just keeps swinging, and one time these wins and one time these wins, and then these guys repeal the opening the borders of the previous one, and these guys close it, and so on, and the thing just continues. We as human beings have to recognize that we can't just cancel the borders, and we can't just impose borders. Rather, we have to use borders to independently, each nation, each person, each country, each being needs to have its independence on the one hand, and yet it needs to work independently to connect with all the others. That's how every organism works. Every cell in your body has a membrane. Every organ in your body has a membrane. But they're working for the sake of the whole body. And then the borders don't become separators. They don't become division. They become actually bridges and connections and connectors that allow each element to be independent and on its own on the one hand, and yet in great beautiful connection with the rest of the elements, the rest of the cells, the rest of the body. And I don't see
I'm
any
here.
politician saying anything close to that. Anyone
I'm
suggesting
here.
anything close to that.
This is me. These are the qualities I was born with. This is how I developed. These are my traits and what I like. That's me. And there's you. Those are the qualities that you, after hundreds of thousands or billions of years, were formed into. And these are the things that you like. And you like spicy, and you like sweet, and you like this. And each one has their own definition, right? We wouldn't have water unless oxygen was defined and hydrogen was defined, and then they come together in a special
Yes,
way. So
exactly.
each one needs to be there needs to be a strong, strong border of who am I? And then what? Help me explain
And
the next
then
piece. The next
and
piece.
then
Okay,
you
neat.
can independently connect to the others. If you
And then you
just if
there you
you
go.
yeah, that's it. If we
Well,
just
there's to be a need for it,
invade
though.
each other, then we are not connecting. We're just overpowering each other. It took billions of years, literally billions of years, until cells understood that how they can what's the configuration that allows them to become a multicellular organism. At first, they were just killing each other and raping each other's resources, and that they went through that juvenile state for millions of years. I think 1.5 billion years from the prokaryotic cell, or however you call it. I'm probably not being precise here, to the multicellular cell. And multicellular organisms are essentially everything that exists in our life. Every plant you look at, every animal, you yourself, we're all multicellular organisms, and it's thanks to nature having this patent, this concept of connection between different individual qualities, independent qualities. The entire spiritual structure, which is behind the scenes of everything we see in reality, is called 10 sfirot, 10 qualities that are completely opposite to each other. If you study the nature of the qualities, the sfirot, the 10 sfirot, that are the spiritual structure behind everything in reality, then you see that Chokhmah is opposite to Bina, and Chesed is opposite to Gvura, and so on and so forth. And then there are specific sfirot there that are the integration of certain qualities in a very unique way, until that structure essentially creates the short circuits, the biggest plus in reality, Keter, the quality of the creator, and the biggest minus in reality, let's say Malchut, the quality of the created being. That connection happens through without erasing, reducing, or limiting any quality. It's opposite, different qualities that find a configuration where they can work together. And so that's
And the purpose of
yeah.
all
But
of
this is
that.
the inner.
Yo, Chris.
Go ahead.
This is every time we're always talking about like the spiritual work or the inner work of a person, and it's always kind of like this cloudy. You can't really feel like where does that even happen, right? But then when you put something like another person in front of you or something that you're again like today, I was about to go to bed and I was like getting my room ready, right? And I was like I pick up my shoes and I had to like put them in a place and I was like, why do I have to, like do things, it's just annoying that I was just mad at like having to just do, something. It's just annoying to move, right? And everyone has these kind of like thoughts, and they have this like type of existence where it's just it doesn't make sense why they're doing it. You put in this reason, like, okay, we came out of the womb, since we came out of the womb, We were born, first of all, we were in a great place within the womb, come out, immediate suffering. The first thing you do is you start crying, and from then on, you're just suffering from the end. Now you give like this opportunity, you have this template. Okay, you feel the oppositeness, you feel suffering, and this is the autonomy, the place of autonomy where we're supposed to do some kind of work, some kind of thing where I'm putting pieces together, plugging the puzzle pieces together, back together, and that's something consciously that's happening, which is exactly what the wisdom of Kabbalah talks about, which is practically, if you want to practically do something about it, there's plenty of examples and plenty of places we can do it, including at the end of May.
All right. There we go. Nice.
Very classy, Chris.
Nice. Clever plug.
If
but
you want to.
but yes, in an environment like the KabU retreat, you can feel what is that kind of connection that we're talking about, because no one will tell you in that environment no one will invade your borders. No one will the kind of connection that we're working on is different people, whoever they are, whatever they are, from whatever walks of life, whatever borders they are in, their mind, their heart, their mentality, the walk of life, wherever they come from, we learn how to connect above our individual qualities without erasing them or changing them. We study and become sensitive to a higher or deeper level of connection that connects us above our differences. That's the unique thing that you actually learn how to do and to practice in a Kabbalah environment, in a Kabbalah gathering. It's come as an individual, stay an individual, but learn how to connect that individual to a collective whole where you can feel a greater reality. That's what it's about. So that tension between the individual and the collective will continue in human society until we learn how to do exactly that. How to connect the individual and the collective harmoniously without erasing the individual, but rather putting the individual in connection with the whole, serving the whole and gaining from the whole, and feeling the spiritual kind of life that exists in that connection. If you want to come to the retreat, you want to learn more about it.
Can we get a link in the chat?
Yes, I'll put a link in the chat right now.
Ben Yisrael wants to know what will that be, Gevura in Yesod. So Ben Israel, come to the retreat and we'll answer that question. That'll be Gevura in Yesod.
Yeah.
Friends, we'll be back
wait.
next Thursday.
What? Quote? Can we do a quote? Can we do a quote real quick?
Yeah, do a quote.
And with that, okay. Here's a because it's right on the money, as they say. What we just discussed. So again, this is from our teacher. Check this out. Our true border is between the nature of this world and the nature of the upper world. This is the border that we can't break through as humans. Beyond that border is a nature of bestowal and love. Ultimately, at the end of our development, after all the life cycles in this world, we all have to get to the point where we cross into that nature. Then, one feels an eternal world unbounded by time, movement, or anything. No borders. It's a different reality. This is called godliness, where you equalize with the upper force. All right.
We open our hearts together. We will find, and we'll see that love can cover all the crimes. Open our hearts together. We will find, and we'll see how love will cover all the crimes. another choice that waits. Together rising high above these lies, and see the world through your eyes. In every moment there's a chance to see another vision of what we could be. Behind the colors of the shattered heart, the color